Welcome to the ESA Queensland Young Economist podcast. My name is Briana Long, and I'm a young economist and the Deputy Secretary of the Women in Economics Network, Queensland branch. Today, I'm joined by Karen Hooper, an economist whose wide-ranging career has included positions as part of the RBA, Queensland Treasury, and the University of Queensland, and now she plays the important role of Commissioner at the Queensland Productivity Commission. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. We're hoping to discuss your career journey and the roles you've played as a way of showing young economist students the important role that economists play in our institutions, particularly within the state of Queensland, and how important it is that economists have a seat at the table where important decisions are made, you being one of those economists. So, given that the podcast is hopefully going to be listened to by high school and maybe even younger students, Karen, have you always wanted to be an economist? And if not, what led you to study economics?
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to join you. Like many who may be listening in, during my high school years, I was really unsure what career I wanted to pursue. That was until I studied economics, which I loved. I had a great teacher and I found economics very relatable. The second key influence on my choice of career was my father. My father actually worked in banking. We regularly spoke about the economy over the daily newspaper, probably showing my age. And we watched the federal budget together. It was our thing to do each year. I went on to study economics at university because I was genuinely interested in economics. At the time, I really wasn't sure where economics would take me. But I saw how economics could shape and understand the world we live in and how it could provide a contribution to policy. I realised that economics was the language I had to learn if I wanted to be part of the policy conversation on the issues that mattered. And it was the intersection between economics and public policy that interested me most and explains the career path I've ultimately chosen in the public sector. So I was really motivated by wanting to pursue a career where I could make a difference. And for me, economics, and more precisely, a degree in economics, provided the runway and supported that ambition.
Thank you. I think that's a really great to hear that there was a teacher that influenced you. I'm pretty sure it's very common. So I'll move on to our first real question, I guess. I'd love to understand a bit more about what you do now as the Commissioner for the Queensland Productivity Commission. To quote the QPC website, the QPC provides independent policy advice to the Queensland Government to help lift productivity, drive economic growth, and enhance living standards for Queenslanders. To help our students understand what that looks like in practice, could you explain your role as the Commissioner? I'm particularly interested in what's involved in your day-to-day work, how you get to utilise your economics knowledge, and what the practical aspects of delivering the QPC's responsibilities entail.
Thank you, Brie. I was really privileged to be appointed to the board of the Queensland Productivity Commission when the commission was re-established by the Queensland Government in April this year. The re-establishment of the commission comes at a time when productivity has been elevated into the policy spotlight. And I'm sure that everyone listening will recognise that, productivity is the key driver of long-term sustainable growth and living standards, and the need to lift our productivity performance is important if we are to secure better outcomes for the community. Might just touch a little bit on the Commission and then I'll delve a little bit deeper into my role and particularly what I do day to day. So the Productivity Commission is an independent statutory body. And its role is to provide, as you well noted, to provide independent, evidence-based policy advice to the Queensland Government with the overall aim of lifting productivity, driving economic growth and enhancing living standards for Queenslanders. The Commission is an advisor to the Queensland Government with a work program informed by direction from the Queensland Treasurer. The Commission's core activities include public inquiries and research and advice on economic, social and regulatory issues. And our role also includes the administration, monitoring or provision of advice on best practice regulation. The success of the Commission depends on the quality of its ideas and advice to government. As a Commissioner on the board of the Queensland Productivity Commission. I work closely with members of the board to provide policy leadership across the Commission's work program, to help set the strategic direction of the Commission and to oversee the efficient and effective functioning of the Commission. Day to day, the role is quite varied. I represent the Commission in meetings with stakeholders and government, make presentations on our work, and of course engage with the staff across the work program. And as a board member, I attend the Commission board meetings where important decisions are made, including on the advice and recommendations that will ultimately be provided to government. We adopt an evidence-based approach in all aspects of our work. So in my role, I get to apply the economic theory and data and policy development skills that I've developed over the course of my career. And this grounding has been incredibly useful in providing important oversight and digesting the complex reports that come to the board for decision. Stakeholder consultations are a really important part of the role and underpins the Commission's inquiry work. So one thing I'd like to stress is that in addition to the technical skills, economists, particularly working in public policy, also develop important soft skills. So communication, interpersonal or people management skills are also incredibly important in having our policy impact and influence and gathering the evidence to support rigorous policy advice. What I particularly enjoy about my role is the diversity of tasks and the issues that come across my desk every day and the opportunity to meet and work with a great group of people. And of course, what drives me is the opportunity to make a real difference in the lives of the community through the quality of the policy advice that we provide.
Amazing. Thank you. It sounds like such an interesting role. Would you be able to walk us through your career journey? I'd love to hear about key decision factors and changes on your path, as well as the highlights of each of your roles.
So economics provides so many career options. So when I was entering the third year of my economics degree at the University of Queensland, I began seriously contemplating what direction I wanted to take. Ultimately, I decided to pursue a career in public policy, and the decision was really motivated by wanting to make a difference, but also in part influenced by the period in which I found myself. So I completed my university studies in the early 1990s, and those of you who have studied economics or maybe old enough to remember will recall that Australia was in recession. It was our last recorded recession, and at that time, Australia actually had a double-digit unemployment rate. At that time, I could see very directly how economic conditions affected the community, and the role of policy and public institutions was very much in the spotlight at that time. My decision to pursue a career in the public sector was also prompted in part by a letter to the editor to our local newspaper, the Courier Mail, which made it really clear to me the importance of sound policy advice and the potential influence of policy decisions on the lives of Australians. As unemployment was a big concern, and understandably so during the period in which I was studying, there were many letters to the editor on the topic of unemployment. And being a student of economics, my eye was drawn to one particular letter proposing a so-called solution to Australia's unemployment problem. The letter writer called for women to be forced to quit their jobs when they got married as a way to solve Australia's unemployment problem. As you would probably appreciate, I was quite stunned and quite outraged at this so-called policy solution, so much so I penned, and yes, it was still snail mail back then, my first and last letter to the editor admonishing the proposal on economic and equity grounds, confirming very clearly that my career will end in retirement and not marriage. My letter was actually published and represents possibly my first experience at offering policy advice. So that letter was a watershed for me and gave me a clear direction for my career. So my first role on completing university was actually at the Reserve Bank of Australia in Sydney. First as a cadet, working in the economic group during my honours year. And then I returned to the bank again to the economic group as a graduate. I entered the bank when there was a lot of interest in and discussion of the bank's role. It was a period when the inflation target was introduced, and it was a really exciting time to be at the bank. The RBA was a brilliant training ground. I worked with some superb economists, developed my data and analytical skills, honed my writing skills, and work in the bank complemented well the formal training in economics that I'd received at university and gave me a really practical and direct exposure to policy making and the policy process. I actually left the bank to complete my PhD at the University of Queensland. It was something I always wanted to do and probably the hardest. I was also working not only to pay the bills, but seeking out experience in areas of government that genuinely interested me. So while undertaking my PhD, I actually commenced work in the Queensland government. I enjoyed a number of very different roles, just to give listeners a sense of the breadth of different projects. I was heavily involved in developing a First Nations economic development strategy. It was my first exposure to consultation, and I saw firsthand the value and importance of consultation in the policy development process. I also worked in Queensland Treasury on tax policy around the time of the introduction of the goods and services tax. So the introduction of the GST was a significant change in Australia's tax system. So again, it was a really exciting project to be involved in, very complex, and again involved a lot of consultation, not only across government, but with Commonwealth Treasury at the time. And I was really fortunate to be invited back to the RBA to establish the bank's Queensland office in Brisbane and the liaison program in Queensland in 2001. And I returned to the bank a few years later to lead the Queensland office. And for those who may not be familiar with the bank's liaison program, the liaison program at the bank served two main roles. First, economic intelligence gathering, so collecting timely information through meetings with business, industry and community to inform the bank's assessment of monetary policy. Then the second function of the liaison program was representation. So the bank had a number of state offices across the country with the aim of improving the bank's communication and engagement with the community. The time I spent working in the RBA's liaison program was actually a very turbulent period. It was punctuated by a large number of shocks to the economy, including September 11 and the twin disruptions to travel and tourism caused by the collapse of one of Australia's major airlines. Of course, there was the global financial crisis. And in Queensland, we had a number of natural disasters, cyclones, and of course there was the 2011 flood event, which was quite devastating. These shocks served to demonstrate the value of the business liaison program and the importance of the timely intelligence gathered from business and industry in providing a gauge of economic conditions and the business cycle. What I valued about my role at the bank at that time was the ability to get out and about, literally at the coalface at times, helping to complement the official statistics with real-time economic intelligence gathered from talking with decision makers, so those in business and industry. And, I had relationships with some of Queensland's largest firms. These discussions helped to answer puzzles in the official statistics and provided some important insights to help inform the bank's forecasts and policy positions. In my role leading the bank's Queensland office, I also had the pleasure and privilege of working with economics teachers to promote an understanding of the economy and the role of the RBA and monetary policy. And I undertook annual roadshows to schools organised by the Queensland Economics Teachers Association. And I estimate that I probably presented to over 10,000 students during my time at the RBA. And it was one of those roles I really enjoyed, getting out, talking to students of economics and seeing the love and passion that they also shared for the study of economics. And I've retained close connections with the Queensland Economics Teachers Association, as I'm a really strong and passionate believer in the value of an economics education and the important role of our teachers. And of course, after the bank, I've since moved into the area of microeconomic policy and productivity with roles in Queensland Treasury and the Queensland Productivity Commission. Last year, while Head of Productivity at Queensland Treasury, I led Queensland's participation in the landmark revitalisation of national competition policy, which was endorsed by the Queensland Treasurer through the Council on Federal Financial Relations in November of 2024. And since moving to the Queensland Productivity Commission, I've been focused on leading our best practice regulation work program and supporting our inquiry into construction productivity, which aims to identify opportunities to lift productivity in the sector, recognising the importance of lifting housing supply to address issues of housing affordability and to support the delivery of the government's capital program. So quite a broad career, but a common thread has been that it's centred in the public sector, very much focused on the contribution that economics can make to policy.
Thank you. Yes, an absolutely fascinating career. And I am absolutely shocked that in the 1990s, someone was confident enough to say that women need to quit their jobs. I'm very glad that you were there to counter that. Linking to what you've spoken about with your work with QUEDA and students in economics, throughout your career, as you just said, you've been involved in education and you're still involved with the Queensland Economics Teachers Association, and you're also on UQ's School of Economics Advisory Board. Something that I've heard a lot lately is the importance of keeping up the pipeline of economics students. So my question is in three parts. Could you talk to some strategies to keep students engaged and wanting to study economics? Is there anything that young economists can do to help and contribute to keeping a love of economics alive in future students? And why is it important to encourage the study of economics?
Thanks, Bri. I might answer the last question first.
Sure.
There's much to recommend the study of economics. So there's a wide range of career paths and the opportunity to make an impact through interesting work on a variety of topics. And economics is an important discipline because economic decisions, including the policy decisions made by government, can have significant and far-reaching impacts on community outcomes and standard of living. And it's really important we have a healthy and diverse pipeline of economists interested in public policy. Economists have a valuable and important role to play in the public sector as advisors. And this is because public policy shapes every facet of our economic, social and environmental well-being. So it's important that policy is developed well, is robust and is anchored in evidence. The work of economists in identifying and analysing policy problems is really critical to improving community outcomes. And economists who work in public policy are often driven by wanting to make a difference, and that's certainly what attracted me to working in policy, as I've outlined. So how to boost engagement in economics? Well, for me, the joy of economics is in the application of economics to real-world problems and decisions. All problems are economic problems and can be approached using an economic framework. And many of the issues students are interested in are the very issues economists are working on, whether it's looking at ways to lift housing supply and address affordability, encourage more sustainable use of the environment, promote better education outcomes, or deliver improved care to children and older Australians. Economics has a role to play in identifying appropriate solutions. So in my mind, demonstrating how economics can be put into practice and to show the impact and influence of economics, I think provides a way to draw more students into the study of economics.
Thank you. As pivoting now, as a member of the Women in Economics Network, I wanted to ask a question focused on your experience being a woman in a male-dominated field. Personally, I've had a really great experience in this career and I've had wonderful female mentors. We also now have many women leading our economic institutions to look to, including yourself. What has your experience been as a woman in economics? Were you at times the only woman at the table, and how has that changed throughout your career?
At the time I chose to study economics, I didn't actually quite realise how trailblazing that choice was. And I did face some hurdles. So on completing grade 12, I faced considerable pressure to take a more traditional career path. But I was quite resolute in my decision and determined to study economics. I was the first female in my family to go to university. And when I got to university, there were no female lecturers in my economics courses. And at that time, there were no female role models in economics. And as you've noted, Bree, times have certainly changed. We've seen this shift in the recent appointments at some of our leading economic institutions with Danielle Wood, Chair of the National Productivity Commission, Michelle Bullock, first female Governor of the Reserve Bank of Australia, and of course, Jenny Wilkinson, Secretary of the Treasury. Economics remains male-dominated, and yes, despite these developments, there remain some occasions where I am still the only woman in the room. However, women in economics are strongly encouraged and supported. There's certainly more support available now than when I commenced my career many years ago. And I'd like to give a shout out to the Economic Society and the Women in Economics Network, which have done a fantastic job at promoting economics to women and supporting the career paths of female economists. And because there are more women in economics and very visible role models, there's also that support network and mentoring available to women that may be contemplating a career in economics. And there's certainly support available.
Thank you. That's really great to hear. A final closing question to finish our discussion today. I want to ask advice for our audience. If you were to imagine yourself as a young student today, just finishing high school and deciding to study economics, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a young you?
If I could give one piece of advice, it would be to find your purpose and passion. There are so many career options and opportunities for economists. And for me, career satisfaction comes from working every day with a clear purpose and passion. So when charting your economics course, I think it's important to think about the types of issues or problems that you're most interested in. And even if you don't plan to work as an economist, an economics degree or training in economics is a valuable part of your toolkit in any career because it can open the door to so many possibilities.
Karen, it's been fantastic to hear about your career journey, the challenges you faced, and how much things have changed throughout your career. Thank you so much for joining today and sharing all of that with us.